The night was bright with gold lights when the billionaire heir fell, and the poor maid ran straight toward him. Music stopped. People gasped. The rooftop of the Skyline Hotel in Lagos went silent. Ethan Blake, young, rich, and proud, clutched his throat and dropped to his knees. His face turned pale, his lips turned blue, his eyes rolled back. Grace stood there in her plain black maid dress and worn shoes, a tray of glasses shaking in her hands. She saw the truth before anyone else did. Ethan wasn't drunk. He wasn't acting. He could not breathe. She let the tray crash to the floor. She pushed past tall men in tuxedos and women in sparkling dresses. A guard yelled at her to stop, but her feet did not listen. She slid next to Ethan, turned him on his side, checked his mouth, and saw the terrible sign. His tongue was heavy and his chest barely moved. Someone had poisoned him, or he was having a deadly allergic reaction. "Give me space," Grace shouted with a voice she didn't know she had. Nobody moved. They stared at the poor maid touching the billionaire heir. Grace tilted Ethan's head, pinched his nose like she had learned from the charity clinic poster, and placed her mouth over his. She breathed air into him, 1 breath, 2 breaths, then pushed hard on his chest. She did it again, and again. It looked like a kiss, but it was life. It was hope. A drone camera buzzed above. Phones came out. People whispered, "Look at the maid kissing him." Security ran closer. A silver-haired woman in a green dress screamed, "Get away from my son!" But Grace did not stop. She breathed for Ethan with all the heart inside her. His chest rose. It fell. It rose again. Suddenly, Ethan's eyes opened for a second and fixed on Grace's face, a face he had never noticed in his father's big glass house. He tried to speak, but no voice came. 1 tear slid from his eye. Then the tear froze. From the far corner, a tall man in a blue suit pointed and shouted, "She poisoned him! Arrest her!" 2 guards grabbed Grace's arms. A glass vial rolled near Ethan's shoe and tapped the floor like a little bell. Grace's words tumbled out. "He needs an EpiPen! Please, now!" But the guards lifted her away. And then, Ethan's chest stopped moving. The city wind rushed over the roof. A siren wailed on the street below. The silver-haired woman cried out, "Ethan!" Grace fought against the guards, her voice breaking. "Let me help. Please." The guard's radio crackled. A new voice said, "If the heir dies, no one leaves this roof." And for 1 long, terrible second, everything hung in the air like a held breath. Hours earlier, this day had started like any other day for Grace. She woke up before the sun in a small single room with a tin roof. The room smelled like soap and clean water because she always cleaned, even though the roof still leaked when it rained. She shared the room with her younger brother, Noah, who slept on a neat mat under the window. Noah was 8, smart, and full of funny questions. Grace loved him the way a seed loves rain. "Do rich people ever trip?" Noah asked as he tied his school shoes. "They do," Grace said, smiling, "but they pretend it is part of their dance." Noah giggled. Grace packed him a small lunch, 2 meat pies, a bottle of water, and an orange she bought late last night because it was cheap. She kissed his forehead, and the 2 of them stepped out into the busy morning street. The city roared awake. Buses honked, birds sang, and people called out prices for bread, fruit, and roasted corn. Grace worked at the Blake family mansion as a maid through a service called Clean Hands. The Blakes owned half of the big towers around the lagoon. People said their money was so high it could touch the clouds. But money did not change how people looked at a poor girl in a faded dress. Some smiled at Grace, others looked through her like she was air. Still, Grace moved with a quiet, careful pride because her mother used to say, "Kindness is a crown no one can steal." Her mother had passed away when Noah was small. Her father had left even earlier, like a boat down a river that never came back. So Grace learned to be strong, even when she felt small. At the mansion gate, the security guard, Mike, checked her ID. "Big event tonight," he said. "Do not talk to guests. Do not look them in the eye. Keep your head down." Grace nodded. "Yes, sir." Inside, she changed into the black uniform. She tied her hair back. She polished glasses until they shone like tiny moons. The kitchen team rushed around her. Mrs. Dean, the head housekeeper, gave fast orders like a drumbeat. "Grace, you will go to the hotel tonight. Rooftop service. No mistakes." Grace's heart beat faster. She had never served at a rooftop event before. As she worked, She caught small pieces of big lives. A news screen in the staff room showed Ethan Blake, the only son of Richard Blake, walking out of a boardroom, cameras flashing. Ethan had just returned from the UK to join the company. People called him the Golden Lion because of his bright eyes and bold walk. He looked strong and sure, like the world could not push him. But TV pictures do not show secrets. In the corner of the staff room, 2 catering men whispered. "Tonight, they will announce a huge deal," one said. "Some people do not want that deal," the other said, his voice sharp and cold. "Some people prefer the old ways." Grace did not mean to listen, but the words stuck to her thoughts. She carried trays to the van. She helped load boxes. Ms. Dean told her, "Keep your distance from the family. If you see trouble, find a guard." As they drove to the Skyline Hotel, the city shone with office lights, like stars fell to the ground and lived inside windows. Grace looked out and imagined a different life, where Noah had his own desk, his own books, and shoes that did not pinch his toes. She imagined a life where kindness opened every door. At the hotel, the air was sweet with flowers. Guests wore gold and silver, black and white, deep blue and emerald green. Grace walked softly, eyes down, tray steady. She moved like a shadow that helps without being seen. Near the bar, she heard a laugh that sounded shiny. A woman said, "Ethan will speak at 9. A man replied, "If he speaks at all." The words scratched at Grace's mind. She set her tray on a side table and checked her service list. Move from bar to east corner, then to the middle, then to the VIP area and return. Her hands shook. "Don't make trouble," she told herself. "Just do your job." Then she saw Ethan up close for the first time. He stood near the glass railing, Lagos glittering behind him like 1,000 smiles. He wore a clean black suit and a white shirt. His tie was the same deep blue as the lagoon. People crowded him, but he kept looking at the sky like it was a map only he could read. For a fast moment, Ethan's eyes crossed Grace's face. Not long enough to see her, but long enough for Grace to feel seen by the stars. She turned to go, and 2 men brushed past her. One of them was the tall man in a blue suit. He had quiet eyes that stayed too still. The other wore a small lapel pin shaped like a wave. Grace only noticed because the pin caught the light and winked like a secret. "Everything is set," the tall man said. "As planned," the one with the pin answered. Grace's steps slowed. As planned, the words had the sharp smell of danger. She should tell someone, but who would listen to a poor maid? She looked around and found Mike, the mansion guard now part of hotel security for the night. She walked to him and spoke low. "Sir," she said, "I think something bad is planned." "By who?" he asked. "2 men, one with a wave pin," she said. Mike sighed. "Grace, this is a high event. Do your work. Do not bring stories." He pointed her back to the serving area. Grace bit her lip. She wanted to shout. She wanted to be brave. But rules are strong walls, and she had learned to walk around walls, not through them. Still, her mother's voice floated up like a song. "If you can help, you must try." She moved again, but this time she watched. She watched the men, the glasses, the hands. She noticed a small switch by the bar that the wave pin man flipped with his little finger. She noticed a drink handed left when it should have been handed right. She noticed a bottle with a label that looked the same as the others, but had a tiny mark at the edge. It was all small, 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 but danger often walks in small shoes. 9 o'clock came. A host tapped the microphone. The crowd turned to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said, "tonight we celebrate the Blake Foundation and their new plan for clean water in our city. Please welcome Ethan Blake." Claps rose like rain. Ethan stepped to the microphone, smiling. Grace stepped closer to the middle with a fresh tray. She kept one eye on Ethan, one eye on the bar. Ethan spoke about hope, about helping children drink good water, about kindness running like a river through every neighborhood. His voice was rich and steady. People nodded. Some wiped tears. A waiter passed Ethan a glass of sparkling drink. Light hit the bubbles. The drink looked like a tiny sky caught in a cup. Ethan lifted it. Grace felt the warning rise in her like a drumbeat. She did not know exactly why. She only knew this. The drink was wrong. "Sir!" she called, too soft for the stage but loud enough for one guard to glance at her with a frown. Ethan sipped. At first, nothing happened. Then he coughed once, twice. His hand went to his throat. The crowd's clapping slowed to clumsy beats and stopped. Ethan tried to speak again, but his voice was broken glass. He staggered. The tall man in the blue suit did not move. The wavepin man smiled with his lips, but not his eyes. Ethan fell. The next minutes burned fast and bright. Grace dropped her tray. She ran. People shouted. The silver-haired woman in green, Ethan's mother, cried his name. The guards froze for a blink, confused by their training and their fear. Grace did not freeze. She knelt, turned Ethan, cleared his mouth, lifted his chin, and sealed her lips to his. She gave him air. She gave him life. From the side, someone snapped a photo. "The maid is kissing him," a voice said, mean and small. Another voice said, "What is she doing?" A third voice whispered, "Is she crazy?" Grace pressed down on Ethan's chest, counting 1, 2, 3. Her hands hurt. Her breath burned. But she had no space for pain. "EpiPen," she shouted. "Allergy kit, now!" "Get her off him," the tall man in the blue suit demanded. He pointed at her with a cold smile. "She is the one. I saw her by the bar." Two guards rushed and pulled Grace away. Ethan's mother fell to her knees. A tiny glass vial rolled from somewhere and kissed the floor by Ethan's shoe. The wavepin man bent, grabbed it fast, and slipped it into his pocket. Only Grace saw. "Please!" Grace cried, twisting in the guard's arms. "He needs the pen!" "Who gave you the order to touch him?" one guard barked. "Who are you to kiss the air?" Grace's heart pounded in her ears. She looked at Ethan, whose lips were gray now. She looked at the crowd. So many rich faces, so many cameras, so much fear. Then she did something she had never done in her life. She yelled at the top of her voice, strong and clear, "If he dies because you stop me, it will be your fault." The shout cut through the noise. The silver-haired woman's head snapped toward Grace. For a second, a single second, the mother saw the truth in Grace's eyes. No lies, no greed, just a burning need to help. The mother's voice came out like thunder. "Let the girl help!" The guards loosened their grip. Grace fell hard to her knees and went back to work. She breathed for Ethan again. She pushed on his chest again. "Stay with me," she said. "Please stay." A staff medic rushed forward with a small black case. Grace grabbed the yellow pen from it, pulled the cap, and drove the needle into Ethan's thigh. She counted under her breath. 1001, 1002. Ethan's chest rose. It fell. It did not rise again. The wind pushed against Grace's back, as if the city itself wanted to help, but could not. The medic checked pulse and shook his head, fear on his face. The mother sobbed. The tall man in the blue suit lifted his phone and said into it, calm and flat, "Plan B." Grace's hands trembled. She leaned in, mouth to mouth once more, tears running down her cheeks. "Come back," she whispered. "Please come back to us." For one heartbeat, a light flickered in Ethan's eyes. It went out. The drone's red light blinked above, recording everything. The security radio crackled. "If the air dies, no one leaves this roof." Everyone held still. Everyone waited for the next breath that did not come. And then, just as Grace drew in more air to give him, a gloved hand landed on her shoulder from behind. A new voice, cold as night, said, "Step away from him, girl." Grace turned her head and froze. The person behind her wore a mask like a theater smile. In the mask's reflection, she saw something moving fast toward the table leg near the fallen vial, a small spark like a tiny firefly, racing in a wire no one else had noticed. The spark reached the wire. Something under the table clicked, and everything on the rooftop held its breath again. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments, and if this story has your heart racing, please like, subscribe, and share so more friends can join our story family. The spark under the table lit for a split second, then fizzled with a faint pop. Most people didn't notice it, but Grace did. Her heart stopped and started again in one painful beat. She had no idea what the wire was connected to, but every nerve in her body screamed danger. The masked man's hand pressed harder into her shoulder. "Step away," he repeated. His voice was calm, too calm, like he was in control of everything. Grace shook her head, tears in her eyes. "He'll die if I stop," she cried. The silver-haired woman, Ethan's mother, snapped at the guards, her voice fierce like a queen. "Let her finish. Don't you see she's the only one fighting for him?" The guards hesitated, caught between orders and fear. Then Ethan's chest rose faintly again, weak but there. A shaky breath slipped out of him, soft as a whisper. Gasps spread across the rooftop like ripples in water. "He's breathing," Grace said, relief flooding her. She bent again, giving him one more breath of life, pressing on his chest with all the strength in her small arms. But the masked man stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Enough," he growled, reaching for her wrist. And that was when the explosion happened. Not loud, not fire, but glass shattering. A champagne bottle burst on the far table, scattering shards everywhere. People screamed, thinking it was a bomb. Panic roared across the rooftop. Guests ran, heels snapping, chairs tumbling, waiters dropping trays. The distraction gave Grace her moment. She yanked free, planted her palms on Ethan's chest again, and shouted to the medic, "Stay with me, count with me." 1, 2, 3, the medic obeyed, pumping in rhythm. Ethan coughed suddenly, a harsh, choking sound. He gagged, rolled slightly, and spat out foam. Then his chest lifted again, stronger this time. "He's alive!" Grace cried. For one beautiful moment, hope filled the air. Ethan's mother sobbed with joy, clutching her pearls. The guests slowed, turning back, but that joy didn't last. The tall man in the blue suit raised his hand, and 3 more masked men appeared from different corners of the rooftop, stepping through the chaos. Their movements were sharp, too sharp for normal guards. Each one carried something hidden under their jackets. Grace's skin prickled with dread. These men weren't here to help. They were here to finish what the poison had started. Ethan lay weak, barely holding on. The medic leaned over him, trying to stabilize him. Grace stood between Ethan and the masked men, her fists clenched even though she had nothing but her courage. The tall man's voice was icy and calm. "Take the boy. Leave no witnesses." The silver-haired woman screamed, "No!" Panic turned into chaos. Guests shoved each other to escape. Security scrambled, but the masked men moved like shadows, precise and fast. One drew a weapon that caught the rooftop lights in a cold glint. Grace's whole body shook, but she planted herself firmly in front of Ethan. "You'll have to go through me first," the tall man sneered. "That can be arranged." And then, without warning, Ethan's weak hand lifted and grabbed Grace's wrist. His lips parted. He whispered, broken but clear, "Run." Grace's eyes widened. Run? Leave him? No, she couldn't. Not after everything. Not after she had breathed her very soul into him. She shook her head fiercely, tears streaming. "I won't leave you." The masked men stepped closer. The wire under the table sparked again, crawling toward something hidden in the shadows. A low hum began to rise, like machinery waking up. And in that exact moment, the rooftop doors slammed open. A flood of police officers stormed in, shields raised, guns drawn. Red and blue lights flashed against the glass walls. The masked men froze, caught mid-step. The tall man in the blue suit didn't flinch. He simply looked at Grace, his lips curling into a cruel smile, and whispered words only she could hear. "This is only the beginning." Then as the police surged forward, he pressed a button on his wristwatch. The hum under the table grew louder. The floor shook, and before anyone could react, a hidden device beneath the rooftop clicked into life, its red light glowing brighter and brighter. Grace screamed, "Get down!" The rooftop shook again, louder, stronger, like the building itself was about to breathe fire. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know where my story family is joining from. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this story so more friends can join us for the next shocking story. The rooftop shook like thunder had crawled up through the ground. Glass cups rattled, plates slid off tables, and people screamed louder than before. The red light under the table blinked faster, sharp and angry, like a heartbeat about to burst. "Bomb!" one guest shouted. "It's a bomb!" Chaos swallowed the rooftop. Men in suits shoved women in gowns aside. Heels snapped, children cried, and guards stumbled over chairs. The police tried to keep order, shouting, "Stay calm! Stay calm!" But fear is louder than any command. Grace's heart pounded. She dropped flat over Ethan, shielding his body with her own. "Hold on," she whispered, her lips trembling. "Don't leave me now." The masked men moved like wolves caught in a trap. Two of them tried to fight the police, pulling small pistols from their coats. The rooftop exploded in noise. Gunshots cracked, glass shattered, and smoke filled the air as officers fired back. But the tall man in the blue suit didn't fight. He stood still, calm, watching Grace. He wanted her to see his smile. He wanted her to remember his face. Then, in one sudden motion, he sprinted toward the side railing. "Stop him!" an officer yelled. Too late. The tall man vaulted the railing and disappeared into the night, a black shadow swallowed by the city lights. Grace wanted to chase him, to scream his name, but she didn't even know it. All she knew was that Ethan's life still hung by a thread beneath her. The red light under the table blinked brighter. The hum grew louder, filling the rooftop like a swarm of bees. "Device!" one officer shouted. "Clear the floor!" A bomb squad officer dove under the table. His gloved hands moved fast, wires twisting under his grip. "It's counting down!" he yelled. "Get everyone out! Now!" The silver-haired woman, Ethan's mother, refused to move. She fell to her knees beside her son, clutching his limp hand. "I'm not leaving without him." "Ma'am!" A policewoman grabbed her arm. "Please, we don't have time." Grace's voice cut through the chaos. "Help me carry him." The medic, sweating and pale, nodded. Together, he and Grace lifted Ethan's weak body. His head lolled to the side, his breath shallow but still there. Every step felt heavy, like carrying the weight of the whole world. The bomb squad officer shouted again. 30 seconds! Grace's legs shook as she staggered toward the rooftop doors. The medic held Ethan's other arm, the mother clutching his hand as they stumbled forward together. Guests shoved past them, panicked, desperate to survive. But before they reached the door, boom! The floor shook violently. A sharp blast of smoke shot out from under the table, filling the air with fire and dust. The windows cracked, alarms wailed, and people screamed again. Grace dropped to her knees, shielding Ethan once more. The medic threw himself over both of them. For a moment, the rooftop felt like it would split apart. Then silence. Not complete silence, but the strange, heavy silence that follows disaster. The kind of silence where everyone holds their breath, waiting to see if the world will still exist. The smoke began to clear. The table was gone, shredded into splinters. The bomb squad officer lay on his side, coughing but alive. The bomb hadn't blown the roof apart. It had only blasted smoke, confusion, and fear. Grace's chest heaved as relief crashed over her. The device wasn't meant to destroy the building. It was meant to distract, to cover the tall man's escape. And it had worked. The silver-haired woman kissed Ethan's forehead, sobbing. "Stay with me, my son. Please stay." Grace wiped tears from her face. Her heart was still racing, her hands still shaking, but deep inside she knew this wasn't over. Whoever that man was, he wasn't done. The police cleared the rooftop. Officers guided guests downstairs, some still crying, some still coughing. Fire alarms blared, red lights flashing across the walls. Grace and the medic carried Ethan carefully down the stairwell while his mother held his hand the entire way. His body was weak, but his chest still moved. Faint life, a fragile flame that hadn't gone out yet. When they reached the hotel lobby, ambulances were already waiting. The medic shouted for a stretcher. Ethan was rushed inside the nearest ambulance, oxygen mask placed over his face. His mother climbed in beside him. Grace started to step back. She was just a maid after all. She had done what she could. Her place wasn't inside that ambulance. But before the doors closed, Ethan's mother turned to her. Her eyes, sharp and royal, locked on Grace. "You saved my son tonight," she said, her voice breaking. "Get in. You're coming with us." Grace froze. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her. "Ma'am, I don't belong." The woman's voice rose like a command. "Get in." The medic gave her a small nod. "She's the reason he's still breathing. Let her ride." Grace hesitated only a moment more, then climbed inside. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The siren wailed. The city lights blurred past the windows as they sped through the night. Grace sat on the edge of the seat, holding Ethan's cold hand tightly in hers. She prayed silently, her lips trembling. She had never been this close to wealth, to power, to danger, and now she was trapped in all of it. The mother stared at Grace with a mixture of suspicion and gratitude. "Tell me, girl," she asked softly, her eyes narrowing, "why did you risk your life for my son?" Grace swallowed hard. Her answer came from the deepest part of her heart. Because every life matters, rich or poor, and because, her voice broke, someone has to care. The mother's eyes glistened with tears. She didn't reply, but her grip on Grace's shoulder tightened, as if she had found something she didn't expect in this poor maid. Then Ethan coughed again. His eyes fluttered half open. His lips moved, whispering something no one could hear. Grace leaned close, her ear to his mouth, and what she heard made her blood run cold. He whispered a name, the name of the man who tried to kill him. "Where are you watching from?" Drop it in the comments. I love seeing our story family from every corner of the world. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it so more people can join us for the next shocking story. Grace leaned so close she could feel Ethan's breath on her ear. His voice was weak, broken like glass, but the name slipped out clear enough to freeze her blood. "Victor!" Grace blinked. "Victor!" she whispered back, confused. Ethan's eyes fluttered closed again, too weak to say more. The heart monitor beeped steadily, his chest rising shallowly under the oxygen mask. Ethan's mother's head snapped up at the sound of that name. Her lips tightened, her eyes hardening into steel. "Did he say Victor?" Grace nodded slowly. The woman's face turned pale, but her jaw clenched like a lioness hiding a roar. She whispered under her breath, as if to herself, "Impossible. Not him." Grace frowned. "Ma'am, do you know this Victor?" The woman didn't answer. She turned her head sharply to the medic. "Drive faster," she barked. The ambulance siren wailed louder, cutting through the Lagos night like a scream. Grace sat there, her heart pounding. She didn't understand all of it, but she knew this much. Whoever Victor was, he wasn't just anybody. He was someone important, someone close. The ambulance screeched into St. Matthew's private hospital, the glass doors swinging wide as doctors rushed out with a gurney. Ethan was wheeled out quickly, his mother close behind, her emerald gown dragging on the spotless white floor. Grace stepped out last, her plain maid's uniform stained with sweat, dust, and smoke. She didn't know whether to follow or stay back. She didn't belong in a world of billionaires, hospitals with gold signs, or bodyguards standing like statues. But then Ethan's mother looked back, her sharp eyes locking on Grace again. "Come," she ordered. Grace obeyed, her steps quiet but steady. Inside the hospital, white lights glared from the ceiling. Doctors surrounded Ethan, attaching wires, speaking in fast medical terms Grace couldn't understand. His mother paced like a caged tiger, whispering prayers under her breath. Grace stood against the wall, wringing her hands. Every second felt heavy, like time was dragging a mountain behind it. She thought about Noah at home, probably asleep on his mat, dreaming about tomorrow's school. She thought about how far she had stepped from her small, simple life into something that felt like a storm she couldn't escape. Finally, a doctor stepped out of the room. His face was tired but calm. "He's stable for now," he said. "We got to him in time." Relief flooded Grace so hard she almost collapsed. Ethan's mother exhaled, covering her face with both hands. For a moment, the rich woman looked just like any other mother, terrified of losing her child. Then the doctor added, "But his system is weak. Whatever poison he ingested was strong. It will take days before he fully recovers, and—" He hesitated. "We'll need to run tests. The police will want to ask questions." Ethan's mother nodded stiffly. "Thank you, doctor." When the doctor left, she turned sharply to Grace. "Tell me exactly what you heard. Don't leave anything out." Grace's voice shook as she spoke. He whispered one word, one name, Victor. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who Victor Blake is?" Grace froze. "Blake? The same name?" "No, ma'am," Grace said softly. The woman's lips pressed into a hard line. "Victor Blake is Ethan's cousin, my late husband's brother's son, and—" She paused, her voice dropping like a stone. "He is next in line to inherit the company if Ethan dies." The truth struck Grace like a slap. A cousin, family, blood. Her voice trembled. But why would family do this? The woman's eyes burned with old grief, because family can be more dangerous than enemies when money and power are involved. Before Grace could respond, the hospital doors burst open. A group of men in dark suits walked in, their shoes clicking on the marble floor. At their center was a tall man with slick black hair and a perfect navy suit. His smile was polished, but his eyes were sharp like knives. Grace's stomach twisted. She recognized him. The tall man in the blue suit from the rooftop, the one who had pointed at her and called her guilty. But now he wasn't just some guest. He was Victor Blake. "Where's Ethan?" Victor demanded, his voice smooth but hard. "I heard what happened. I came straight here." His eyes scanned the room, and for a split second they locked with Grace's. His smile widened slightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Ethan's mother straightened her shoulders. "He's alive. Thanks to her." She gestured toward Grace. Victor's gaze slid back to Grace, slow and deliberate, like a predator studying prey. "Ah, the maid," he said softly, almost like he was savoring the word. Grace's throat went dry. She wanted to speak, to tell the truth, but her tongue felt heavy. Victor stepped closer to Ethan's mother. "A shameful night, Auntie. Such carelessness at a family event. Who would dare target Ethan?" His eyes flicked to Grace again, cold and calculating. Unless, of course, someone inside made it possible. Grace's heart dropped. He was twisting it. He was already planting the seed. The woman's eyes blazed. "Enough, Victor. If not for this girl, my son would be dead." Victor raised his hands in false surrender. "Of course, Auntie. I'm only concerned for all of us." But the way he looked at Grace told a different story. He wasn't finished with her. Not at all. At that exact moment, Ethan's monitor inside the room beeped loudly. Doctors rushed back in. Ethan was convulsing, his body jerking against the wires. Grace gasped, clutching her chest. "No, he's crashing!" The doctors shouted orders, nurses scrambling. Ethan's mother tried to push inside, but a nurse blocked her. "Please, madam, we need space." Victor's eyes gleamed, and for the first time, his smile looked real. Grace saw it. And in that moment, she knew with all her heart, Ethan's whisper was true. Victor wanted him dead. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from our story family across the world. And if this chapter shocked you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share so you won't miss the next twist. The heart monitor screamed as Ethan's body jerked violently on the hospital bed. Doctors shouted over one another, "Charge the paddles! Clear the line! Push 1 milligram! Now!" Grace's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her palms together, whispering prayers under her breath. She couldn't take her eyes off Ethan. She had fought so hard to keep him alive on that rooftop. Was it all slipping away again? Ethan's mother slammed her fists against the glass window separating them from the emergency room. "Save my son!" she cried, her voice raw with desperation. Inside, a doctor rubbed the defibrillator paddles together. "Clear!" he shouted, pressing them to Ethan's chest. His body jolted upward, then slumped back. The monitor flatlined. Grace felt her knees weaken. "No!" The doctor tried again. "Clear!" Ethan's body jumped once more, but the line stayed flat. Victor stood in the corner of the waiting room, his arms folded, his face calm. Too calm. Grace turned and saw it again. That flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't even flinch at the sight of his cousin dying. "Don't you dare smile," Grace whispered under her breath, her fists clenching. The doctor's voice roared again. "Clear!" The paddles shocked Ethan's chest a third time. His body convulsed, and for a second, the monitor stayed flat. Then, beep, beep, beep. A weak heartbeat. But it was there. Ethan gasped, sucking in air like he had just surfaced from drowning. Nurses swarmed him, stabilizing his oxygen mask, rushing IV fluids into his arm. Relief swept through the hall like a wave. His mother collapsed against the wall, sobbing into her hands. Grace exhaled so hard she almost cried herself. Her whole body shook with relief. He wasn't gone. Not yet. Victor's voice broke the silence. Smooth. Cold. Too controlled. "What a miracle," he said softly. Seems he has 9 lives. Grace's head snapped toward him. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she let him see her fury. Or maybe he has people who won't let him die, she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. Victor's smile didn't break. If anything, it widened, but his eyes sharpened like glass. "Careful, Maid," he said softly, so only she could hear. "You're speaking in a world you don't belong." Grace wanted to shout the truth, that she had seen him on the rooftop, that Ethan had whispered his name, but she bit her tongue. Not yet. No one would believe a poor maid over a polished billionaire heir. If she spoke too soon, Victor would crush her like an ant. The door to Ethan's room opened and the doctor stepped out again. He's stable now. He'll need close monitoring for the next 48 hours. Ethan's mother rushed to his bedside, clasping his hand tightly. She kissed his forehead, whispering a prayer of thanks. Grace started to follow, but froze when Victor's hand clamped lightly around her arm. His touch was polite, almost gentle, but his grip was iron. "You've caused quite a stir tonight," he said, his voice low. "First on the rooftop, now here. People are talking. Some are saying you poisoned him yourself to play the hero." Grace's eyes widened. "That's a lie." Victor leaned closer, his breath warm and poisonous in her ear. "Yes, but lies spread faster than truth. And when the police start asking questions, who do you think they'll believe? A Blake or a maid from the slums?" Grace's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I don't care what you say. I know what you did. And Ethan knows too. He whispered your name." For the first time, Victor's smile faltered. Only for a second, but Grace saw it. A tiny crack in his perfect mask. His hand tightened on her arm before he let go. "You should be careful, girl," he said softly, his voice like velvet hiding a knife. "Accidents happen to people who see too much." Then he straightened, adjusted his suit, and walked toward Ethan's room, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Grace's knees felt weak, but her resolve grew stronger. She had faced death tonight and kept Ethan alive. She wasn't going to let Victor win. She stepped back into the hallway, her thoughts racing. If Ethan survived long enough to wake fully, he could expose Victor himself. But until then, she had to protect him. From poison, from lies, from whatever Victor planned next. And she knew one thing for certain: Victor wouldn't stop. He wanted Ethan gone. And now, he wanted her gone too. As Grace sat down in the waiting chair, her mind whirled with fear and determination. She didn't know how, but she had to find proof, real proof, before Victor destroyed them both. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and froze. A message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. It read, "You're in over your head. Leave him, or you and your brother are next." Grace's blood ran cold. Noah. Her hands trembled as she read it again. They knew about her brother. They knew where she lived. Her whole world tilted, and her whisper was barely audible. "No, not Noah. Where are you watching from?" Let me know in the comments. I love seeing our story family everywhere. If this twist shocked you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more friends can follow the next story of this tale. Grace's hand shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Her eyes stayed locked on the glowing message. "You're in over your head. Leave him, or you and your brother are next." Her throat tightened. Noah, her sweet 8-year-old brother, the only family she had left. He was at home, probably curled up on his mat, dreaming innocent dreams. He had no idea that a storm far bigger than them had already reached his doorstep. Grace's heart hammered. She wanted to run out of the hospital that very second, grab Noah, and vanish into the night, but then her eyes drifted to Ethan's hospital room. She could see him through the glass window, pale, fragile, breathing with the help of machines. He was alive because of her, alive because she had refused to walk away. And now, Victor wanted her to choose. Save Ethan or save Noah. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "God, what do I do?" Just then, Ethan's mother appeared at her side. The older woman's sharp eyes softened for the first time that night. "You're trembling," she said, laying a hand on Grace's shoulder. Are you all right? Grace swallowed hard, quickly slipping her phone back into her pocket. Yes, ma'am, just tired. The woman studied her for a long moment, as though she could see the storm inside Grace's heart. But she didn't push further. Instead, she squeezed her shoulder. You're brave. My son owes his life to you. Don't ever forget that. Grace forced a small nod, but her mind was already racing. If Victor's men knew about Noah, she couldn't waste another second. She had to get to him. She waited until Ethan's mother turned away, then slipped quietly out of the hospital. The night outside was heavy and quiet. The sirens long faded. Grace flagged down a battered yellow taxi and gave the driver her address. As the car sped through the city, she kept checking over her shoulder, convinced that every passing motorcycle or dark sedan belonged to Victor's men. By the time the taxi stopped in front of her small tin-roof room, Grace was shaking from head to toe. She flung the door open and rushed inside. Noah, she called. Her brother stirred on his mat, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Grace, why are you back so late? Grace knelt and pulled him into her arms so tightly he squeaked. I'm sorry, Noah. I'm sorry. Confused, he hugged her back. What's wrong? Did something happen? Grace held him for a long moment, her tears wetting his hair. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to tell him that their lives were in danger, that powerful men wanted to hurt them. But Noah was only 8. His world was schoolbooks, cartoons, and small questions about life. He didn't deserve to carry the weight of her fear. Nothing's wrong, she whispered, forcing a smile. I just missed you. But as she tucked him back under his blanket, her heart knew the truth. Nothing would ever be the same again. When Noah drifted back to sleep, Grace sat by the window, staring out into the night. She thought about Ethan lying in that hospital bed. She thought about the cruel smile on Victor's face. She thought about the message that had turned her heart to ice. Then she made a silent promise to herself. She would protect Noah, and she would protect Ethan, but she couldn't do it alone. Somewhere out there, in the noise of Lagos, someone had to know the truth about Victor Blake. Someone had to have proof strong enough to bring him down. Grace just had to find them before Victor found her first. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one wasn't a threat. It was a photo. Her heart skipped. The photo showed Noah, her Noah, taken just hours earlier, walking home from school. And beneath the photo, 4 chilling words glowed on the screen. Time is running out. Grace's scream caught in her throat. She clutched the phone, her whole body shaking. Victor wasn't bluffing. He had already reached Noah. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. I love hearing from my story family worldwide. If your heart is racing right now, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it so you don't miss what happens next. Grace's hand trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone. The picture of Noah burned into her mind. His small backpack, his tired little smile, the dusty street he walked every evening, and now, proof that Victor's men were watching him. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. She had been strong all night, running through fire and poison to save Ethan. But this was her greatest fear. Noah was innocent. He had nothing to do with the Blakes, the company, or Victor's greed. Grace gripped the window frame, whispering, "Please God, not Noah, don't let him be hurt." Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Come to the pier at dawn, alone, no police, if you want the boy safe." Grace's legs went weak. She slumped against the wall. Dawn was only hours away. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wake Noah and run far, far away. But her heart knew the truth. There was nowhere Victor's power couldn't reach. If she ran, they'd find her. If she fought alone, she'd lose. She pressed her forehead against her knees, tears spilling. What do I do? And then, like lightning, an idea struck. Victor had made one mistake. He thought she was weak. He thought she was just a maid with no voice, no allies, no strength. But Grace had already stared death in the face and fought it back. She wasn't weak. She wasn't alone. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found one name. Mike, the mansion's security guard. He had brushed her off earlier when she tried to warn him, but he was the only one she could trust now. She dialed. "Grace? Why are you calling me this late?" Mike's voice was groggy. Her voice shook. They have Noah, Victor's men. They sent me a picture. They want me at the pier by dawn." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What? Grace, this is serious. Don't go there alone." "I don't have a choice," she hissed, her tears spilling. "If I don't go, they'll hurt him. Mike, please, please help me." There was silence. Then Mike's voice hardened. "Text me the details. I'll be there." Grace hung up, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't know if Mike could truly protect her, but she knew one thing. She wasn't walking into Victor's trap without a fight. Hours later, the first pale light of dawn touched the Lagos sky. Grace held Noah's small hand tightly as they walked toward the pier. She hadn't told him the truth, only that they were going somewhere safe. His sleepy eyes trusted her completely, and that trust cut her deeper than any blade. The pier was quiet, the water dark and restless. Seagulls cried in the distance, their wings flashing against the sunrise. Grace's heart raced as she scanned the shadows. She knew Victor's men were there, watching. Then she saw him, Victor Blake, standing tall in his perfect navy suit, as though he had stepped straight out of a boardroom. His smile was smooth, but his eyes were cold. Two masked men flanked him, their hands hidden in their jackets. "Right on time," Victor said smoothly. His gaze drifted to Noah, and his smile widened. "So this is the brother I've heard about. Charming boy." Grace shoved Noah behind her, her voice trembling with fury. "Don't touch him." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Relax, I don't hurt children, not unless I have to." He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden pier. "I gave you a choice, Grace. Leave Ethan, or lose everything you love." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. "Why? Why are you doing this? He's your cousin. He's your blood." Victor's smile vanished, replaced by something darker. "Blood means nothing when billions are at stake. Ethan's survival threatens everything I've worked for. The company should be mine. And if you keep standing in my way—" He tilted his head toward Noah. "Then accidents will happen." Grace's knees shook, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You can't scare me into silence, Victor. Ethan knows the truth, and so do I." Victor chuckled softly. "Who will believe you? A poor maid?" He leaned closer, his whisper like poison. "By the end of today, no one will even remember your name." And then bang! A gunshot cracked through the air. Victor's men drew their weapons, spinning toward the sound. From the shadows, Mike emerged, his gun raised, his face grim. "Step away from the boy, Blake." Grace gasped with relief. Victor's smile returned, slow and mocking. "Ah, the loyal guard. How touching. But you're outnumbered." More shadows moved behind Victor. More men. More guns. Grace's heart pounded. She grabbed Noah's hand, whispering, "Don't let go of me, no matter what happens." Mike shouted again, "This ends now, Victor." Victor spread his arms, his voice smooth and confident. "No, Mike. This is just beginning." And then he snapped his fingers. The pier beneath them rumbled. A boat engine roared to life, pulling up fast with more masked men on board. Grace froze, clutching Noah tighter. She realized with horror, this wasn't just a meeting, it was an ambush. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing where our story family is listening from. And if this part had your heart racing, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next shocking twist. The roar of the speedboat grew louder, its dark hull cutting through the water like a shark. Grace's stomach twisted as masked men leapt onto the pier, boots pounding against the wooden planks. Guns gleamed in their hands. Mike shoved Grace and Noah behind him, his pistol raised. "Stay down!" he barked. Grace clutched Noah tight against her chest, her heart hammering so loudly she could barely hear over the chaos. The smell of salt water mixed with gasoline burned her nose. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. They were trapped. Victor stood tall in his perfect suit, smiling like a king surveying his kingdom. "I told you, Grace," he said smoothly. "You don't belong in this game. And Mike—" His gaze slid to the guard. "You were loyal to the wrong side." Mike's jaw clenched. His finger twitched on the trigger. "One more step, Victor, and I swear—" Bang! A gunshot cracked through the air. Mike staggered back, clutching his arm, blood spreading through his sleeve. He didn't fall, but his pistol slipped into the water with a splash. Grace screamed, "Mike!" Victor clapped slowly, mockingly. Such bravery! Such stupidity! He turned his cold eyes back on Grace. Now, girl, hand over the boy, or I'll let my men take him from your arms. Grace's body shook, but she pulled Noah closer, pressing his face into her chest. Her voice trembled, but carried fire. Over my dead body. Victor's smile sharpened. That can be arranged. The masked men moved closer, forming a circle around them. Mike groaned, struggling to stay upright, his good hand reaching for a small knife at his belt. But there were too many enemies, too many guns. Grace's mind raced. She had no weapons, no plan, just her courage. Her eyes darted to the water. The boat rocked gently, tied with thick ropes to the pier. And then, an idea sparked. She whispered fiercely to Noah, "When I say run, run to the water. Don't look back." Noah's wide eyes filled with fear. "But, trust me," Grace hissed, her tears hot against his hair. Victor's voice cut through the tension. "Tick-tock, Grace. Make your choice." Grace's heart pounded. She stood, her body shielding Noah, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "I choose." She paused, every muscle in her body screaming with fear. Then she shouted, "Now!" She shoved Noah toward the edge of the pier and sprinted after him. "Stop them!" Victor roared. Bullets cracked through the morning air. Wood splintered. Grace grabbed Noah's hand and leapt, the cold water swallowing them whole. The shock of it knocked the air from her lungs. She kicked furiously, dragging Noah under the pier's shadow. Gunfire splashed around them, bullets tearing the water. Noah clung to her, terrified. Grace's chest burned as she pulled him toward the boat's underside. The ropes holding it swayed just above. She pushed Noah up, whispering, "Climb." Noah gripped the rope with trembling hands. Grace followed, her wet clothes heavy against her skin. They clambered onto the back of the speedboat, hidden for a moment from the gunmen on the pier. Victor's furious voice echoed above. "Find them!" Grace panted, clutching Noah. The boat engine hummed, already running. Her eyes fell on the controls inside the cabin. It was madness. She had never driven a boat in her life. But if she didn't try, they'd both die. She lifted Noah inside and climbed behind the wheel. Her hand shook as she gripped it. The keys were still in. "Hold on!" she shouted. She slammed the throttle forward. The boat jerked violently, tearing away from the pier. Water sprayed high, the engine screaming as they shot into the lagoon. Bullets chased them, splashing against the waves. Grace ducked low, her arms shielding Noah. Victor stood on the pier, his face twisted with rage, his voice carrying over the water. "Run, little maid! Run while you can! You won't escape me forever!" Grace's teeth clenched as tears streamed down her face. She shouted back over the roaring engine, her voice raw but fierce. "I'll never let you win." The city skyline rose ahead, sunlight breaking over the horizon. Grace tightened her grip on the wheel. She didn't know where they were going, only that she had to keep moving, keep fighting, keep protecting Noah and Ethan both. But deep inside, she knew Victor wasn't bluffing. He would hunt them. He would use every coin, every man, every shadow of power to crush her. And yet, Grace felt something she hadn't felt all night. Hope, because she had survived. And as long as she drew breath, she wouldn't stop fighting. Behind her, Victor's men scrambled to untie another boat. The chase wasn't over. The battle for Ethan's life and her own had only just begun. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing where my story family is listening from. And if this part had you gripping your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next shocking twist. The speedboat tore across the lagoon, the engine screaming louder than Grace's pounding heart. Spray slapped her face and the wind clawed at her wet uniform. Noah clung to her waist, his little arms tight as iron, his frightened sobs muffled against her back. Behind them, another boat roared to life. Victor's men were giving chase. Their boat was bigger, faster, slicing through the water like a predator. Grace pushed the throttle harder. "Hold on, Noah!" she shouted over the roar. "I'm scared!" Noah cried, his voice breaking. Grace's eyes stung, but she forced her voice steady. "Don't be scared. I've got you. I promise I'll never let them touch you." Bullets whizzed past, smacking the water into violent splashes. One tore through the side of the boat, making Noah scream. Grace gritted her teeth, zigzagging across the waves, praying it would throw off their aim. Victor's voice carried across the water, cold, and furious. "You can't run forever, Grace." Her hands tightened on the wheel. She shouted back, though her throat burned, "Watch me!" The skyline of Lagos gleamed ahead. Bridges, tall buildings, the busy harbor. If she could reach the docks, maybe they could disappear into the crowd. Maybe. But their boat was too small, too slow. The men behind them were gaining. Noah pointed with a trembling hand. "Grace! Over there!" Grace's eyes followed, and she saw it. A rusted cargo ship anchored near the docks, its sides covered in peeling paint, its name barely legible. Ocean Star. Cranes loomed overhead, and stacks of containers lined the pier. An idea sparked in her mind. Risky. Dangerous. But it was their only chance. She turned the wheel sharply, veering toward the massive ship. The pursuing boat followed, closing the gap. "Grace!" Noah squealed, holding tighter. "Trust me, Noah," she cried, pushing the throttle to its limit. The little boat shot toward the ship's underside, where a ladder dangled loosely against the metal hull. Grace braced herself, heart in her throat. "Now, Noah!" she shouted. "Climb!" Noah's eyes widened in panic. "What?" Grace steered close enough for the boat to scrape the ship's side. She shoved Noah toward the ladder. "Climb now! Don't look down!" Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he obeyed. His small hands gripped the rusted metal, feet scrambling as he climbed. Grace glanced back. The men were almost on them, guns raised. She turned the wheel sharply again, ramming her boat against theirs. The impact rocked both vessels, sending men tumbling. Bullets sprayed wildly, sparks flying as some ricocheted off the cargo ship's hull. "Climb faster, Noah," she screamed. "I'm trying." Noah sobbed, hauling himself up. Grace grabbed the ladder next, pulling herself up just as the pursuing boat circled back. One man leaned out, aiming his gun. Bang! The bullet struck inches from her hand, tearing rust off the metal. Grace yelped but kept climbing, her muscles screaming. She reached up, grabbed Noah's foot, and pushed him higher. "Don't stop, Noah, almost there." Finally, Noah scrambled onto the deck, collapsing in tears. Grace followed, dragging herself over the rail just as Victor's men rammed their boat against the ship's side again, shouting curses. Grace collapsed beside Noah, gasping for breath. She hugged him tight, rocking him back and forth. "You did it. You're safe. You're safe." But her relief didn't last. A shadow fell across her. She looked up and froze. Standing on the deck was an old man with weathered skin, a sailor's cap pulled low, and a deep scar across his cheek. His eyes, sharp and knowing, narrowed at Grace and Noah. Behind him, two other sailors held iron rods in their hands, glaring. "What are you doing on my ship?" the old man growled, his voice rough as gravel. Grace stammered, "Please, we need help. They're trying to kill us." The old man's eyes flicked to the edge of the ship, where Victor's men shouted and tried to throw ropes. His face darkened. The old man's eyes flicked to the edge of the ship, where Victor's men shouted and tried to throw ropes. His face darkened. Then he muttered a name under his breath, a name that made Grace's blood run cold. Blake. Grace's lips parted. "You know them?" The old man's jaw tightened. He glanced at Noah, then at Grace, and his next words were a whisper filled with decades of bitterness. "I know more about the Blake family than you ever will. And if Ethan's alive, then he needs to hear the truth about what his father did." Grace's heart pounded. "What truth?" The old man's eyes burned with secrets. "The Blakes aren't just billionaires. They built their empire on betrayal. And Ethan has a right to know what was stolen from him." Before Grace could respond, gunfire rattled from below. Victor's men had found ropes and were starting to climb. The old man spat to the side and shouted to his crew, "Get them inside!" Grace pulled Noah close as sailors dragged them toward a hatch. But her mind was spinning, her chest tight. Because for the first time, she realized Ethan's fight with Victor wasn't just about money. It was about a hidden truth. A betrayal buried deep in the Blake family's past. And somehow, she was standing right in the middle of it. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I love hearing from all of you. If this part shocked you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next twist. The sailors shoved Grace and Noah through a narrow steel hatch and bolted it shut behind them. The clang of the lock echoed like thunder. The air inside the cargo ship smelled of rust, salt, and oil. Noah clung to Grace's hand, trembling, his little body pressed against her side. The old man led them down a dim corridor, his boots thudding against the metal floor. His scar caught the flicker of the overhead light, making him look like a ghost from another time. Grace's chest was still heaving from the chase, but her mind clung to his words. The Blake family built their empire on betrayal. When they reached a small room deep inside the ship, the old man slammed the door shut and turned to face Grace. "Sit." Grace pulled Noah onto a wooden bench, her arms wrapped around him protectively. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Tell me what you mean. What do you know about the Blakes?" The old man lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his weathered face. He took a long drag, then exhaled smoke into the stale air. His eyes narrowed. "Name's Captain Dare. I worked for Richard Blake, Ethan's father, for 20 years. I know what that man did. And I know why Victor will never stop until Ethan is gone." Grace's heart pounded. "Why?" Captain Dare leaned forward, his voice low and bitter. "Because Ethan isn't supposed to inherit the company. He's not just Richard Blake's son. He's also the rightful heir to a billion-dollar partnership Richard betrayed decades ago." Grace blinked, stunned. "I don't understand." The captain's eyes burned. "Richard Blake had a partner, my brother. Together, they built the foundation of the Blake Empire. But when the company started making serious money, Richard betrayed him, pushed him out, erased his name from the records, and took everything. My brother died poor while Richard grew rich, and now the only person alive who can claim that lost inheritance is Ethan." Grace's lips parted, her mind spinning. "So that's why Victor wants him dead? To make sure no one ever discovers the truth?" The captain nodded grimly. "Victor has the board in his pocket. If Ethan dies, Victor takes control. But if Ethan lives long enough to find the truth, Victor loses everything." Grace felt cold all over. She thought of Ethan lying in that hospital bed, whispering Victor's name with his last breath. She thought of the rooftop, the poison, the threats. It all made sense now. But before she could speak, the hatch rattled violently. Victor's voice thundered from outside. "Grace, you can't hide forever. Hand over the boy and maybe I'll let you live." Noah whimpered, burying his face in Grace's chest. She stroked his hair, whispering, "Shh, I've got you." Captain Dare grabbed an iron bar from the wall. His jaw tightened. "We don't have much time. If you want Ethan to survive, you need to tell him the truth about his father, and about what's rightfully his. But listen to me, girl." He stepped closer, his scar casting a shadow across his face. "The truth is dangerous. Once Ethan knows, there's no going back. The Blake's enemies will come after him harder than ever, and they'll come after you, too." Grace's throat tightened. She had already risked her life for Ethan, but this was different. This was a choice that could change everything. The hatch shook again, harder this time. Bullets punched into the steel, echoing like drumbeats. Victor's men were breaking through. Captain Dare shoved a bundle of papers into Grace's hands. The pages were yellowed, edges frayed, but stamped with old company seals and signatures. "Proof," he growled. "This is what Richard stole. If Ethan sees this, he'll know the truth. Guard it with your life." Grace clutched the papers to her chest, her hands trembling. The hatch burst inward with a deafening crash. Victor's men poured in, guns raised. Victor himself stepped through the smoke, his perfect suit untouched by the chaos, his smile sharp as a knife. "Well," he said smoothly, his eyes locking on Grace. "Looks like the maid has found herself a history lesson." Grace rose slowly, Noah behind her, the bundle of papers hidden under her arm. Her heart pounded, but she forced her voice steady. "You can kill me, Victor," she said, her eyes blazing. "But the truth won't stay buried. Ethan will know what you did. Everyone will." Victor chuckled darkly, shaking his head. Brave words. But in the end, courage doesn't matter. Power does. He lifted his hand, signaling his men. Grace held Noah tighter, her chest heaving, her mind racing. She knew this was the moment everything had led to. Life or death. Silence or truth. And then, from far above, the sound of helicopters thundered in the sky. Victor's smile faltered for the first time. Floodlights lit up the deck. Voices boomed through megaphones. "Lagos police! Drop your weapons!" Grace gasped, hope surging in her chest. Mike had called reinforcements after all. Victor's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing at her. "This isn't over, Maid," he hissed. As police stormed the ship, chaos erupted. Men dropped their weapons, others fought desperately, but the tide had turned. Victor slipped back through the smoke, vanishing into the shadows once again. Grace held Noah tightly, tears streaming down her face. She had survived. They both had. And now she carried the one thing Victor feared most: the truth. She looked at Captain Dare, whose scarred face softened for the first time. He nodded at her. "Take it to Ethan. Tell him everything. The fight isn't over. It's only just begun." Grace clutched the bundle of papers, her eyes fierce. She had started this night as a maid serving drinks. But now she was holding the key to a billion-dollar empire and the future of the Blake family itself. And for the first time she truly believed her kindness, her courage, her fight could change everything. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from my story family around the world. And if you've been hooked all the way to the end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more friends can join us for more thrilling modern folktales like this one.